Well, we talked earlier about maybe Georgia Tech being that ACC team kind of hiding in plain sight that could make a run in Charlotte. I think from a national perspective, this time of year brings a lot of the metrics together to try to predict what's going to happen in March. Albeit a lot of those predictions are for gambling purposes. I think for our purposes of trying to figure out which ACC teams besides Duke could find themselves in the second weekend. And certainly after last year, when you had Clemson make that Elite Eight run, and Coach Glenn talked about, Chase Hunter being at the forefront of that, bringing that experience back with Ian Shefflin and two great transfers, obviously coming in Lachlan and Zachary. You've got guys that present metrics that line up with historically teams that are positioned and have and ended up winning the NCAA tournament. And what does that mean? Teams that are in the top 21 of offensive efficiency and the top 31 at the same time of defensive efficiency at this time in the season, not maybe in a little bit less than a month when the selection show comes out. Those metrics may pare down some more, but there's only 10 teams right now that present themselves in those two categories, and Clemson is one of them. Now, you would think that out of the 14 teams from the SEC that may make the tournament, you're going to have at least half of them being those metrics. Well, really, right now, it's just Auburn and Florida that present themselves with those specific metrics. There's actually four Big 12 teams out of that group. And then you have Duke and now Clemson, Wisconsin being the other one that's kind of snuck in there after this weekend from a defensive and offensive perspective. I think when you look at Clemson, if they can replicate and kind of keep themselves, and right now, guys, they're at number 17 in offense, number 24 in defense. I think the experience from last year of not being a stranger to what it takes to get to the second and maybe even the second weekend, but then the second day of the second weekend, having that come back in Shefflin and Hunter, adding in some experience, obviously, in Lachlan and Zachary, and then a coach who, quite honestly, has been a little bit maligned over the years for lack of consistency, but now in the most important time of what Coach Glenn eloquently pointed out of how to build rosters, has put himself back in a position to maybe make a run. Look, we talked about Georgia Tech slip up. If they don't lose that game, they'll probably finish 19-1. And if you take care of business in the league, however good or bad it may be, you're going to be in that position to get probably what should be a top 4 seed historically, but because of the league's lack of strength, they'll probably be a 5 seed. But 4 or 5 in the end really kind of, is a toss up. And I think this year you're going to find yourself talking about Clemson maybe a little bit more. There'll be more national people surprised by, oh, Clemson's playing? Oh, I thought it was just Duke. Guys like us, and obviously yourselves, have been watching this league forever and certainly paying attention to it this year, may realize not just that Duke game that proved what Clemson can do at home, but maybe Clemson is that team that deserves a little bit more love, regardless of the rest of the teams in the league outside of Louisville not taking care of business. We're going to talk about this tournament being the SEC Invitational. There could be 14 of the 68 teams come from one conference. This is basically a second SEC tournament. But at the end of the day, only 16 teams can make the second weekend, and only 8 of those teams are going to make the second day of the second weekend. If the ACC finds themselves with 25% of those 8, and even if they're on opposite sides of the bracket, which they should, I'm not saying Clemson is a Final Four team. But when you historically look at the last 23, I think, NCAA champions, they've come from this pool of 10. And when you start to look at the net ranking right now, it's getting a little bit more refined, which we'll get to later. It may actually help Carolina get in. That net ranking is becoming more and more fed with historical data. It may be a little bit more accurate than you realize. And when you look at the top of that ranking right now are the obvious players that everyone nationally has been talking about. Clemson's kind of lingering right there. If these two metrics hold up, then we're talking about Clemson being in this top 21/31 or better grouping. They may find themselves not just in a group of 8 or 10, but maybe a group of 6 or 8 that a lot more pundits, and you'll hear it. I guarantee you'll hear at least one guy in the post bracket breakdown act like he's got Clemson figured out. Because he'll just look at these metrics and then spew some stuff. He's probably never watched Clemson. Yes, I'm talking to a couple guys not on this show right now. They know who they are. Oh, I'm picking Clemson like it was some, like gaudy, like I did all the research. Clemson is that team that could find themselves repeating themselves. For us, we'd love to see it as ACC folks. I think they're a team that if they can keep taking care of business, have a strong ACC tournament. Look, I love to see the Clemson-Duke rematch, obviously in the ACC final, just to see where Clemson's at and maybe really prepare them even more so for that second or third weekend come March. I think Clemson's the type of team that's kind of earned that respectability right now.
And Mike, let me add a quick postscript to Coach Keating's points about the Clemson Tigers, because you guys know I've been on this Brad Brownell Clemson Tigers bandwagon for a few years now. The coach mentioned more the NCAA tournament concept and angles, which I respect and agree on. The ACC tournament, remember, Clemson has never won in more than 70 years as one of the original members of this league. So when you're trying to do anything for the first time in any school's history, there's something special about that. Also, in 70 plus years, Clemson's only made it to the ACC title game twice. In 70 plus years. Once was before even I was born, and once was the year Tyler Hansbrough and the Tar Heels beat Clemson in the ACC title game. Even getting to the final two would be an historic element. And I think Coach Keating's assessment of Coach Brad Brownell's now 15 years, he's like the elder statesman now, right? In the ACC, now that so many other guys have resigned or retired or are about to retire. It is both fair to say that Brad Brownell's 15 years have been a mixed bag. That's fair. He only made the big dance twice in his first 10 years, right? That's just factual. Throw out opinions. That's not a great track record. It's at Clemson. It's not bad, but it's not great. This is the third time in the last 5 years he's taken him to the big dance. And I really believe this, guys. If we did a deep dive research on, let's just say, the half a dozen greatest basketball teams in Clemson history, I believe that Brad Brownell is now responsible for 3 of the 6. So you can take shots at the guy's 15 years. You can point out the lowlights, but last year's Elite Eight certainly qualifies. The school's never been farther than that. This year's team, I think, has a chance to qualify. Who knows? Maybe tie for a regular season title, maybe win the ACC tournament, maybe make another Elite Eight or beyond run. And then one of his earlier teams was really, really good that ended up in the Sweet 16. So let's be fair to Brad Brownell in a way that many Clemson fans have not been for much of the last 15 years. Again, point out his setbacks and imperfections, all fair, but let's not ignore that he has made Clemson basketball relevant more often in 15 years, or as often in 15 years, than I believe the Tigers were probably for the 50 years prior to Brad Brownell being hired there.
NC Pork, good for the plate, great for the state.
This is the moment we waited for. Everything you want is right here. We gon' give them what they came for. We gon' take it up from last year. Shoot on my shot, boy, I'm long range. Me and the team on the same thing. Stayed down, never switched up. Only thing changed was the game. I'm in the zone now. Nothing can change what we on now. When I pull up, know it's going down. Foot on the gas, ain't no slowing down.